And the reason why we put this together is appropriate to this time of the year, right? You flip the calendar. It's a brand new year. You have to hit the reset button and you're scratching your head going, how the heck am I going to do this again? I need to make as much money as I did last year because it was great. And I need to continue that trend. And what I love is that we're sharing ideas that you can use tomorrow. This is not high level, too much, heavy duty stuff that, how do I implement it? No, there's like one or two things that you can walk away with in every episode that you can use tomorrow.
Welcome back to the Sales Problem Podcast. This is episode 8, and this is the greatest hits episode. I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and joining me is the greatest co-host of all time. He is the GOAT, Steve Comerford. Steve, how you feeling today? And tell our listeners the great news that we've got for this episode.
Well, Daniel, I've never been called a goat before, but I'll take it from you. Put that in my pocket, save it for another day. Hey, I'm doing fantastic. It is a brand new year. We're doing a recap on season 2. Unbelievable. 2 seasons in the can for the Sales Problem Podcast. All those naysayers back when we started this saying, oh, oof, good luck. Hope it works out. But I've enjoyed it. We've had a blast. We've had some great interviews and some awesome people on the show. So I'm thoroughly impressed and blessed that we've been able to experience that, meet a lot of new people, and gain a lot of new knowledge. And to your point around excitement, the Crank brothers and Crank Coffee are now part of the Sales Problem Podcast. That's pretty exciting. 2 guys that love coffee and 2 guys that love coffee, meaning the Crank Brothers and the Sales Problem Podcast guys, are now providing offers back out to our listeners. When you tune in and you add the Sales Problem 15 into your order for Crank Coffee, there's a little offer there for you. So really appreciate you listening. And there's something in there for you too. Should I get some of the samples of the Crank?
Yeah, show them the sample box for anybody that's watching the podcast. Ooh,
we have a Crank Coffee toque, which I needed a toque.
Yeah.
Here's a little gift box with Crank It Up and Morning Glory. Have you had the Morning Glory, Dan?
I've got the Morning Glory right here, Steve.
Nice.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, lots of choice, right? And then a nice little Crank Coffee mug. Pretty sweet. It is almost as good as the Sales Problem Podcast mug, which, by the way, really holds the coffee nice and hot through the day. Just a plug for the coffee mug that you got there, Dan. And then a Crank Coffee mug, which is pretty sweet. I gotta love it.
Now there's 2 options for listeners.
Ah, love it.
And just to jump in there, Steve,
go ahead, jump.
It's the Sales Problem 15. So when you go to buy Crank Coffee, you can now add the Sales Problem 15 for a 15% discount. So what's great about that, I was going to the store, leaving the house to get my coffee. Now I just go online, order it up, put in the code. I saved myself 15%, and I didn't even have to leave the house. There we go.
Gotta love it. And what I find about this coffee, too, is it is nicely priced to begin with compared to all the other coffees out there. So nice. So, Dan, are we jumping into season 2?
Steve.
Yes?
Let's go. Let's start cranking on this one. This is the greatest hits episode. And Steve, everybody loves Cole's Notes when you go back to school. Do you remember Cole's Notes?
Yeah, I struggled with that one.
I never like to read the books. I always got the Coles notes. So this episode reminds me of the hacks that we had back in school. You'd read the Coles notes, you get the general idea of the book, and that's kind of the same as the greatest hits episode, is that we've got 7 episodes before this one. We get it. You don't want to go back and listen to 7 hours worth of podcast. You can just listen to this one and get the essence of every episode. We try to break it down, add a little bit of extra value. So here we go. Let's jump into it for you. Steve, I can't even believe we've got 20 episodes recorded. We're going into season 3. And like you said, we've had some fantastic guests on. Let's start with Alvin Brown, who kicked off our season. And Alvin, I mentioned, is a coach that I hired. And the time I spent with him, Steve, was such a great investment. And I just love where he's coming from when he talks about personal mastery. And that's a huge word, I think, for anybody that's just thinking about setting some goals for themselves. Maybe they're not focused on personal mastery. Seems like a big topic, but what I really like about that is he talks about just getting to know yourself and that being a goal and you having your own personal journey and really becoming self-aware of where are you really strong and then what are the areas that you have to improve for yourself. And then the other part of that mastery, I think, is whatever profession you're in or whatever position you're in. For salespeople, selling is a profession. I don't think it's mastered in your first year or even 10 years in or 20 years in. It takes time to really get the detail and the mastery behind selling. And I think that's what we're doing is bringing people on that are helping people become masters at their craft. So I really love that about Alvin. What were your takeaways, Steve?
I was impressed. The guy's fantastic. It was great to interview him and get to know him. I love that piece around personal mastery. One of his podcasts, because he does nice little snippet podcasts, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. And the one that caught me was around letting go of hostages, like hanging on to people that were dragging you down and not really bringing you any benefit. And I caught that in his interview. And really meant a lot to me, and just having that mindset. And the other one was around dreaming big enough. Are you actually making it big enough that is something that you could really sink your teeth into and accomplish? So that's what I liked. And then the need for a coach, and he's had multiple coaches, which is interesting too, right? And he's coached a lot of different people, but he's getting coached himself too. So I thought that was really neat in that there's never any shortage for advice and for guidance along the way, which kind of gets us into the second episode with the referral coach and Bill Cates. Great guy. Had a great conversation with him. I love the fact of making sure that you are referable. Like putting yourself in a position, like it's easy to ask for a referral, and many times you're not asking. So there's that one aspect of it. But even when you ask for a referral, you have to make sure that you're doing a good enough job to be referable. So that's what I caught from Bill. Yeah. And again, he puts out a lot of great content. He does some fantastic work in the financial services and that investment wholesaler environment. So if you have a chance, dial into Bill's podcast as well. How about you?
Yeah, I thought Bill was, that seasoned professional that brought so many different angles to selling. Referrals is one that can easily be missed, and I like that he went really deep on that one topic. And what stood out to me about Bill, Steve, is he talked about like, know, and trust, which is just such a simple way of breaking things down. But what I really liked about it is the know part is kind of the IQ of selling. You do need to know your products. You need to know what you're talking about. You need to bring that expertise. And that's why people are going to meet with you. But at the same time, 2/3 of that equation is like and trust. which is more the people side of things. If people don't like you and people don't trust you, then does it really matter how much you know about the product? Because you're not going to have connection. So it was interesting to me, that link between you need to be credible and you need to know your stuff, but you need connection in order to make sales. And that was kind of my takeaway from Bill, as well as a differentiator can be just your why. Why do you believe in the product that you're selling? You've got that to sell to somebody, but what makes you want to walk through the door? What about what you sell do you think changes people's lives, or creates a better experience for them, or solves a problem for them? If you're not really clear on that and you can't communicate that as a differentiator, I think you're really missing a big element of sales. And Bill highlighted that nicely. So, Steve, then we went on to David Ellie, who I think was just such a fascinating guy. I could have just sat there and listened to him talk, but he outlined the 7-figure mindset. And the first thing that stood out to me, which I've been saying for 2 years now, is surround yourself with great people. He talked about the importance of not trying to do everything yourself. You're good at certain things, but you can't be expected to be the master of everything, which ties back to Alvin's talk about knowing yourself and then trying to fill in the parts that maybe you don't have with exceptional people that are around you. So the other things that I stood out to me was betting on yourself and really going deep in on, you got to give yourself a chance to succeed at whatever it is you're dreaming big about. So it comes with some risk, but it also comes with a lot of rewards. So if you don't put yourself out there, there's not going to be any results coming your way. So what were your takeaways, Steve, from David?
Well, I think you hit it on the nail on the head with those 2 points, right? Taking risks and building the right team. To copy what you just said, but those were the big takeaways for me. One, it was nice to connect with David again, right? We worked a while back together. He's a super guy, but he stepped out of his comfort zone. He knew what he wanted to, where he wanted to go, and what he wanted to build. I love the aspect of building a community and building some legacy for his family to kind of continue on. Love that piece of what he talked about. But yeah, I think it was risk-taking and the right team were the ones that really stood out for me.
Steve, you actually made a really good point in the podcast. I want to highlight that you put something really great in there, you have to make a decision. Sitting on the fence is one of the points that you brought up. Is you see people all the time. They're trying to decide, do I go this way or do I go that way, or what's the right time, or I have to find the perfect message. And sometimes just making a decision and going for it is the right decision. It's no more magical than that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I had forgotten about that, but it is something I remember back when David and I worked together. And some of the VPs that I work for is like, make the decision, don't look back, keep going forward, and then decide where things go from there. But too often you're looking backwards, going, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and maybe I should go back to that, and that's got to stop that one and keep going forward. Which then brings us to the phone lady, Mary Jane Copps. Did you enjoy that conversation? I really enjoyed that conversation. That was a lot of fun.
Hold the phone. Yeah, she was fantastic.
Again, what I captured in that one is being very intentional with your phone skills, right? Your entry to the client, to get the meeting, to get very specific on your intention when you call, and not be, floating around or asking about the weather or getting into, not very good conversations to then get to the point. Like, no. Here's the point. This is why I'm calling. Here's my purpose, and wrapping it up quickly to move on to the next meeting. And I thought that was like, boom, right on the money. And then she buys into, or I buy into what she's selling in terms of the 1-2 punch, right? That has to be a combination of a email followed by a phone call, or the email saying that I'm going to call on Thursday, expect my call at 9:30, and here's the reasons why we should chat, right? Here's the question that I wanted to ask. So how about you? She's an East Coaster as well, so that was pretty unique.
She is. We got to have the East Coasters on the podcast, Steve, and support our local people.
I think so.
Mary Jane Copps was amazing. And some of the things that stood out to me is one of the things I just get frustrated on is the thought of, I'll just send an email and that's good enough. Mm-hmm. And how come I didn't get a response to my email? And you mean I have to follow up? And if I follow up, you know what? I'll just send another email. And it starts this, chain of just unresponded to emails, which I see all the time. And pick up the phone because it differentiates in the way you communicate. You can use tone and language, and you can hear what, other people are saying and interpret how they're reacting. You just can't get that in a text or an email. But I think the biggest revelation she caused for me, Steve, is the realization that if you didn't grow up with a phone in your house and that being the main way you communicate, that text and email and messaging on social media, that is the primary way that a lot of people are used to communicating. So picking up the phone is not a skill that they've got. And that there's a bit of a barrier there as we get into, working with people that's their background.
Yeah, you take it for granted, I think, that, I just pick up the phone. But I would say that a higher percentage of people, and to your point, right, a higher percentage of people now are having a really tough time with that one. Don't really understand the skill that you really need to make it an effective phone call, really, to make that impact.
Yeah, I think you nailed it too, and it made me think back to Brian Miller that was on our show, and he said, just say the damn thing. When you're on the phone, it doesn't need to be flowery and fancy. Yeah. Just say the damn thing. Yeah. Get to the point. Here's why I'm calling. Love you to call me back. I've got some things for you. Like to meet with you. Done. Mm-hmm. Hang up the phone. So, Steve, then we went to Anthony Tamiza, who I thought we really shook the trees here on this episode because this one was different. This is not your, sales tactics and practical tactical podcast. This is delving into something that I hope listeners didn't expect and then listen to, and it made them think a little bit. Because Anthony brought out some great points about how you feel corresponds to how you look. And all those things go towards performance, which is what the idea behind our podcast is how do we get all the little nuggets that help create a better performance? And if you're overlooking how you look and how you feel, I think you're missing something major. And Anthony brought some great perspective in. I like that he said it's not difficult. Mm-hmm. It's the small things. You don't have to, do a complete transformation, wardrobe overhaul, and change your entire look. Just before you go out the door, check a few things. Check your hair, check your teeth. Make sure you're looking in good shape. Did you shave? Doing all the basic things. Do my shoes match the outfit? Am I fairly well color coordinated? Or am I going out the door, and here's the one I see, without really making any effort? I'm putting on something that is pretty run of the mill, and I know I should probably be putting more effort in, taking it up a notch, trying to look a little more professional, but I just kind of mailed it in again today and threw on the golf shirt.
Or I should have ironed the shirt, but it's hidden, so it won't play that up. I would go contrary to your point at the beginning, is that this actually fits right into what we've talked about in terms of mindset, being different, right? Standing out in a crowd, and showing up in a different manner, right? Feeling good. And I think that feeling good is easily transferred to whoever's in front of you, right? They feel that as well as you do. I like the point of, make sure that you look in the mirror before you head out the door. Like, pause, take a look, scan it. Is it right? Do you need to change it up a little bit? I think that was fun too. But great guy. Like, if anybody's listening and you need some tips and advice, he's a great guy to reach out to. And I'm sure that he'd give you some very practical. And we talked about some practical ideas on people that don't have a lot of money or working on a budget. And he had some very good practical ideas to, again, stand out from the crowd, be a little different, feel confident, feel good about yourself. And I think that translates into, good relationships, easier meetings, and better conversations. Which gets to standing out in a crowd, gets on to Catherine Kerr and the warrior mindset. That was a high-paced, high-energy interview. Lots of good content in there in terms of how to change your game, how to, again, stand out from the rest of the pack and differentiate yourself, what you're selling, your product, your solutions that you bring to the table, and really, setting up yourself for success. I thought that looking at how you set up your meeting, the questions that you ask, the check-in with the client to make sure that you're on the right track. And I think one thing that she talked about was energy, the E in drive, and she was wanting to change that up a little bit. I think that's a component that often gets overlooked, and I think is something that you really need to, before you walk in the door on a meeting or a client interaction, is make sure that you've got that checked and making sure that you bring it to the show. How about you?
Yeah, Catherine was a firecracker, Steve. We had a really courageous conversation with her. She just brought so much to the table. It's hard to kind of identify exactly what to focus on, but I think what came out of it for me is the warrior mindset is about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Good point. And
the easiest thing is to do what we've done every day. And that is the default mode of probably 80% of the people listening. Everybody falls into that trap of just, okay, let's just kind of keep things moving. But when you put discomfort into your life, that's when you're going to get growth. Because if you're not challenging yourself, if you're not pushing yourself, you're not going to get that growth. And she had a great reminder of that. Then the other concept that I really took away is, if you're selling and you're going into an account, figuring out what is it that person needs. Do they have a need for the thing that I'm selling? Does it solve a problem in here? And trying to figure that out as quickly as possible. So if you're going into a sales call and you've got that interview and you're starting to talk to people, that is the first primary focus is, do we have a connection here to sell something, or should I just move on? And it comes down to asking the right questions to get that information and figuring out, do I have a sale here? Should I continue, or should I just go to the next door because this is not a fit? And that's qualifying. And it's so easy to forget to qualify people, but doing that also, I think, creates trust. Figuring out, I might not have something here to sell to you, and thinking not every single person is a perfect fit for what we're selling. There are some people that you should say, hey, I just don't think this is a fit, and I'm going to go.
That honest approach.
That brings us.
I love that. It's a very honest approach, and I think it does get you credibility, right? To say, I don't think today is a good day. Maybe we'll connect later in the future, but thanks for your time. We'll catch up later, type of idea. And I think that goes a long way. That the other person on the other side will go, oh, that's different. You're not trying to sell me something. Maybe I'll connect later. So yeah. Which brings us to
Anil DeLowry, who was talking about being a remarkable presenter. Steve, what'd you take away from him?
That was such a nice segue, wasn't it? Anil,
It was seamless.
Hey, I introduced Anil to the podcast. I had taken one of his courses a couple of years back. I thought he delivers some fantastic stuff, and I already bought into his very simplistic, very tailored, very, only a couple of notes on a presentation if you're doing one, and being very specific with what you're presenting. I love the point around knowing your audience. That one stood out for me. Is you have to do the homework and understand who you're presenting to and what is going to resonate with that crowd. And if there are different people in that meeting or in that presentation, what is their responsibility and how can you talk to those people to really get them engaged in the first, I think it was 12 minutes. You really have to capture their attention to then say, yeah, maybe I'll listen to that guy or that girl for a couple extra minutes, because that sounds pretty good to me. And I think that's what stood out for me.
Yeah, that first 90 seconds, I think if you grab attention, you've got people for another about 11 minutes, and then you've got to get something else in there because our attention spans are wired to need to know what's in it for me and why should I keep listening. Anil brought so many great points up, Steve, and I enjoyed just listening to him through the interview. He is so smooth and he delivers the message. Yes. So if people listening to this, go listen to that episode and just note how consistent he is. Somebody who's truly mastered that ability to present just with the way that he keeps his tone very even. But the takeaway for me, because I love to speak too, Steve, is the power you get having all the buyers in one room and being able to stand in front of them, deliver a presentation, take them all the way through the journey of what your product is, how it fits for people, testimonies. They get to see all of that in front of all the buyers. And you're the person at the front of the room who's delivering a great message, making them feel good, taking them on a journey. That is so powerful as an opportunity versus going door to door and having one person at a time and coming into a company that has multiple decision makers and then trying to one by one get everybody bought into the same idea. I think that is, a real differentiator. Getting everybody in and being able to wow them with a presentation, I think that cuts the sales time down significantly. So that was my takeaway.
I would add too, understand knowing your audience, but whatever position you are in the organization, if you have a you are selling whatever you are providing, right? They're the buyers in the crowd, not necessarily, signing over money or buying something specific, but they're buying into whatever you're promoting, whatever you're trying to change within an organization. If you can make that an impactful presentation, the audience really, it's to get that buy-in from the audience and then making it successful for whatever you're doing, if it's in finance or in operations or in distribution or service or technical services, whatever the case may be. I thought that was a light bulb moment too, that it's not just sales, it's every part of the organization.
And we've got a couple episodes coming up.
I was just going to say 2 episodes coming up, and one, the first one in terms of interesting starting off the year in 2024, right? Setting goals, habits. Tell us a little bit about Julie, because you know Julie.
Yeah, so Julie was somebody I was very excited to come on because she wrote a great book that I just hustled out and got right away, A Few Good Habits, and I've just been loving it. And she is a high-performance coach who really digs into the neuroscience behind setting up success and the habits that get you there. And Steve, when this episode comes out, I hope our listeners go and download right away, because the stuff she talks about is dead simple. She is not going to overcomplicate it. She's not going to make it hard for people to start taking action. It's about really simple strategies that you can start with to get the ball moving and get towards success. And then we went on to our last guest to wrap up the season, who was fantastic, like a jaw dropper.
Yes.
Steve, tell them about our final guest.
Roy Rotnaval. I love this interview. It really caps off season 2 because we started with Alvin, immigrant from Jamaica, him and his mom, very, grinding childhood to get into, having a successful life here in Canada. And then we wrap up with Roy on a high in terms of him immigrating from Sri Lanka, a political prisoner at the age of 17, comes to Canada with $50 in his pocket, multiple jobs in his young 20s, and then sees the corner office to say, that's where I want to be. And then builds from there, from getting a job in the mailroom to then ultimately getting that corner office, executive director, top level position within that finance company. And then all of the stories along the way. So I think that'll be definitely one that people need to listen to, because Roy has a fantastic story. And then inside the stories, there's even more stories around his success as a salesperson, to a sales leader, to a sales executive. Lots of good advice in there.
Yeah, his story is incredible. I was reading the book thinking, I can't believe that somebody's gone through all of this and then has that positive mindset, was able to accomplish so much. It's the ultimate story where you turn adversity into a strength, and you allow yourself, because of the way that you view the situation. He could have, very well said, hey, this has affected me. It's trauma, and it's going to limit what I can do. And he flipped it around and really used the strength behind everything you went through. I won't spoil the surprise, but wow, what an incredible guest for us to have on to cap off the season. So many lessons there from Roy.
Yes, and his book is called Prisoner 1056. If anybody wants to go out there and read it, it is a very good read. Both Dan and I finished it from cover to cover, and I think, to your point, let's not ruin the surprise. It will be a very good episode, and something to listen to over and over again, because again, there's lots of good advice in there.
Steve, here's my takeaway on the entire season 2. Here's what it comes down to for me.
Your drop the mic moment?
This is the drop the mic moment for me. It comes down to that why that we talked about. And if we apply that to this podcast, why are we going out and finding these people and spending our Saturdays recording things? It all comes down to what the purpose of the podcast is how do we create growth? And it's growth personally, and then it's also growth on the sales side. I think the only way to do that is to get new insights that are going to help you create that growth. We can't grow from something that we've already got. That's created the growth of where we are today. And you can be incredibly successful right now, but what we know is there's so much growth ahead of you. But we need some piece of information to kind of shift us or get us to take a new perspective. And as we just outlined all the things we took away from those guests, there's 7 things, and we've got, a couple other that are on the way. Great things that you can apply to your life. I don't know which one it is for our listeners, but what we're doing is providing you those sales tips, those personal growth tips that you can take, go apply which one you think you're most excited about, and create something new in your life. To me, that's the whole why, and it's worth it. If we get one listener who takes something and says, I'm going to go change my life. I'm going to transform this area. I'm going to get better. I'm going to create some growth. My career has just upped a notch because of something here on the podcast that made them go and take a different action. Steve, that's the whole why for me. How about you?
I love it, Dan. You know what? There is a ton of content in season 1 and what we've put together for season 2 and wrapping it up with those 2 episodes. And the reason why we put this together is appropriate to this time of the year, right? You flip the calendar. It's a brand new year. You have to hit the reset button and you're scratching your head going, how the heck am I going to do this again? I need to make as much money as I did last year because it was great. And I need to continue that trend. And what I love is that we're sharing ideas that you can use tomorrow. This is not high level, too much, heavy duty stuff that, how do I implement it? No, there's like 1 or 2 things that you can walk away with in every episode that you can use tomorrow. And just to tweak a little idea or turn on a light bulb to go, I did like that episode with Anthony. And yeah, maybe I need to tweak the look that I'm, showcasing out in the field or on my calls, right? Just one example. So I hope that everybody enjoys listening. I enjoy this time with you, Dan. It's, I think it taps into the 20 plus years that we've spent together in sales. And I learned by my mistakes. And then picking up advice and all of these good ideas, it just helps one enjoy the day. You have to live the day and enjoy the day. And if you could do that a little bit easier and have some fun, that's good for me.
Well, there is more coming from the Sales Problem Podcast because we are headed into season 3. And don't forget that with us is our partner, Crank Coffees, which is a fantastic addition because we're 2 guys that are trying to solve the sales problem. We're 2 guys that love coffee. We know a lot of people listening love coffee as well. So use the Sales Problem 15 code and get yourself a discount. Try these coffees out. What we're telling you is that we believe in them. We believe that they're great coffee. Give it a try. We're going to just try to keep creating value and passing things along to our listeners because if you're listening at this point, we love you. You've supported us. Send this episode to a friend who needs it. Pass these things along. Get other people interested in listening so that they can improve as well. What we're doing is giving you the growth you need to thrive and succeed. We're bringing people on from all around the world, and we're now in 19 countries.
Kaboom.
Giving you tips to grow, and that's what it's all about so that you can become a better version of yourself. So keep listening. Season 3 is on the way. Our guests are going to continue to be fantastic, and we're going to keep delivering things that are going to help you get that sales growth. We love you.